When we think about the conflict between Arabs and Jews, many people only see the modern headlines, but the truth is much deeper and more shocking than one might imagine. We are talking about a rivalry that didn't start with recent territorial or political disputes but dates back over 4,000 years of history. And believe it or not, this feud began within a single family. How is it possible that two nations descended from the same ancestors are still at war today? Here lies the key to understanding the true root of this conflict. When talking about the origins of the conflict between Arabs and Jews, it's like opening a book of 4,000 years of history. It all began with Abraham, a man revered in both Judaism and Islam. He had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, who became the patriarchs of two great nations. Ishmael, son of Hagar, is considered the ancestor of the Arabs, while Isaac, son of Sarah, gave rise to the Jews. Isn't it fascinating how one family could give birth to one of the greatest rivalries in history? This family division ended up shaping the destiny of two peoples. Over time, the sense of rivalry between these two lineages deepened, creating a wound that spans generations. When we look at the earliest moments of this conflict, it's easy to see that the problem wasn't simply a territorial or religious issue, but something rooted in deep family matters. Imagine the emotional impact of two nations believing they are the heirs of God's promise. This, in itself, is fuel for the dispute. Now, if we stop to think about it, the relationship between the descendants of Ishmael and Isaac was complicated from the start. According to the accounts, the two brothers didn't have a harmonious relationship, which led to the separation and distancing of their descendants. This distance turned into distrust and, over time, crystallized into rivalry. The essence of this dispute is, in a way, tied to the struggle for recognition and legitimacy. And so we arrive at the present day, where the origins of this conflict, which seems so ancient and distant, still echo in the speeches and actions of modern leaders. What started as a family dispute evolved into something much deeper, influenced by centuries of history. However, this history intertwines with another fundamental aspect: the common ancestry between Arabs and Jews. Interestingly, despite all the differences and rivalries, Arabs and Jews share a common ancestry that often goes unnoticed. Recent genetic studies show that these two peoples, who have long seen each other as adversaries, are genetically very similar. Science, therefore, ends up confirming what religious traditions have long pointed out. Both groups descend from Abraham. This makes the conflict even more intriguing, as it's a dispute between distant brothers. Culturally, it is also fascinating to observe how Arabs and Jews share many elements. Whether in traditions, family values, or even in their food, there are far more similarities than one might imagine. These common traits were lost in the dust of centuries, but they are still there, subtly intertwining the two cultures. It's like seeing two sides of the same coin that, over time, forgot they came from the same place. If we look closely, these similarities should be a point of unity, but they end up being a source of frustration for both sides. Imagine knowing that the other side has so much in common with you, but historical and religious disputes obscure that connection. Perhaps this shows that, deep down, humans tend to create divisions where, in reality, there are more points of commonality than we perceive. And it is precisely this common ancestry that sets the stage for better understanding the reasons why the conflict has persisted for so long. Genetics and culture are intertwined, but it is in religion that the lines of separation become more visible, something we will explore in the next point: the religious foundations of this rivalry. Want to dive even deeper into biblical themes like this one? Check out our exclusive ebook in the comments. It offers a detailed analysis and spiritual reflections that complement this video. Don't miss out, download your copy now. When we delve into the religious roots that fuel the conflict between Arabs and Jews, we find two powerful and conflicting narratives. The Torah, the sacred text of the Jews, identifies the descendants of Isaac as God's chosen people. Meanwhile, the Quran, the sacred book of Muslims, points to Ishmael as the legitimate heir of the divine promise. This religious divergence is not just a matter of faith, but one of the central pillars that sustain the rivalry between these two nations. These narratives have shaped each group's understanding of themselves and the other. For Jews, the land promised to Abraham and Isaac is an unquestionable gift, a sacred inheritance. For Arabs, the descendants of Ishmael, this same land holds profound significance, reinforced by the belief that Ishmael was the true heir of the promise. It's as if both are competing for the same prize but based on different rules. Religion here is not just a matter of personal faith, but a powerful force that guides the politics, identity, and aspirations of both sides. To make things more complex, over the centuries, religious leaders on both sides reinforced this narrative of exclusivity, exacerbating the sense of legitimacy that each group has in relation to the Holy Land. This has caused religious beliefs to become deeply intertwined with nationalism, making the dispute even more complicated. Thus, the religious foundation of the conflict not only perpetuates the rivalry but also prevents simple solutions from being found. After all, how can one negotiate or divide something that, for both sides, was given directly by God? But this spiritual clash finds a physical common ground. Jerusalem, a city that has become the ultimate symbol of this dispute, and that leads us to the next topic. Jerusalem, a city as old as human history itself, occupies a central place in the dispute between Arabs and Jews. From King David's reign, when the city became the capital of Israel, to its conquest by Arab armies, Jerusalem has been an epicenter of power and spirituality. For Jews, it is the site of Solomon's temple, the ultimate symbol of the connection between the people and God. For Muslims, it is the third holiest site in Islam, with the iconic Dome of the Rock dominating its skyline. The importance of Jerusalem goes beyond its religious significance. It is a point of political and territorial convergence, and whoever controls it, in a way, controls the heart of the conflict. Throughout history, several powers have fought for control of this city, from the Romans to the Crusaders, from the Ottomans to the British. Each time the city changed hands, new layers of complexity were added to the conflict. Walking through the ancient streets of Jerusalem is like walking through a history book. The stones bear marks of conquests, destructions, and reconstructions, reflecting the endless cycle of struggles that mark the city. Even today, Jerusalem remains a point of tension, with Arabs and Jews claiming sovereignty over it. It's almost impossible to ignore the fact that this small city holds immense symbolic weight for both sides. It is this centrality that makes Jerusalem so difficult to divide, both physically and spiritually. Any attempt at peace hits the question, who has the right to the city? And so, Jerusalem remains the focal point of a dispute that has lasted millennia, but to understand how we got here, we must look at the major historical shifts that have shaped this region, which we will explore next. The history of the Holy Land is marked by a succession of rulers and conquests, each leaving an indelible mark on the territory. Initially, the region was under Jewish control, but soon power passed to the Romans, who brought a new order and shaped the landscape with their architecture and administration. However, with the rise of Islam in the 7th century, the region was conquered by Arab armies, beginning a long period of Islamic control. With the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Empire, control over the Holy Land changed once again. For centuries, the region remained under Ottoman control, with relative peace between the various religious communities inhabiting the area. However, the end of World War I brought a dramatic shift. The division of Palestine under British mandate planted the seeds of the modern Arab-Israeli conflict, with contradictory promises made to both sides. Each change of rule brought new challenges and resentments. The British attempt to manage the region in a balanced way ultimately failed, leading to a series of revolts and tensions between the two populations. The creation of the State of Israel in 1948 was the culmination of these tensions, leading to open conflicts that persist to this day. Here we see how historical shifts transformed a local dispute into a global issue. And so, by looking at the history of this land, we realize that the current conflict is not just a matter of territories or borders, but the result of centuries of rule and struggles for control of a sacred place. To truly understand the Arab-Israeli conflict, it is essential to observe this long sequence of historical events, which continues to shape the geopolitical landscape to this day. Now that you know the deep history of the 4,000-year rivalry between Arabs and Jews, what will you do with this knowledge? Does looking at the conflict from a new perspective change the way you understand today's events? This history teaches us that no matter how complex a dispute may be, there are always hidden layers that few people see. Maybe it's time to apply this lesson to our own lives. How many times have you looked at a conflict and only seen the surface, without considering its roots? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you'll continue discovering truths that few are willing to explore. And who knows, the next revelation you learn here might be the key to changing your worldview.